you'll only complain. But I learned that you haven't got this book, and I thought it'd be nice for you to have it. And I was going to say, if you didn't like it, I'll give you the other one, but he's got the other one. I'll sign it in a minute.
Thank you so much. Graham hasn't got this is extraordinary.
He happily said to me this morning, he said, I've got my Racing Life book, and I went, that's a relief, because I nearly brought that book. I thought, I'll bring the Porsche one, because if he's a Ferrari man, he'll never read it. So anybody that's a Porsche member in the family.
He's so right. He's so right. But that man over in the corner there, I've got a fantastic library of motoring books. And that man in the corner there has bought most of them.
He hasn't mentioned it yet.
Okay, so thank you, Derek. Thank you, coffee.
I have to sign the book.
Yeah, thank you. Don't forget, will you?
Very interesting.
Right, okay. I'm going to sit on this. I'm going to sit here.
There you go.
You see, when you go to the RAC and Derek, when the RAC Derek Bell is appearing, right? Simon Taylor, obviously, all right?
So far, yes.
Yeah, and he asked him questions, and I'm going to ask him some questions that I made up, and he may well say to me, "What you asking me that for?" So Derek,
I'm sorry if this gets boring, by the way. Start yawning and get the baby crying.
Derek, you can always say no comment. So Derek, I mentioned earlier that you and I have many things in common. We both grew up in the late 40s and early 50s. You on the family farm in Pagham, me in the smoke of SE27, like you. However, my rich aunt had a bungalow in Ferry, just down the road from me. In the holidays, I stayed there with my cousin, and I remember watching the Hawker Hunters flying out from Ford Aerodrome. Yeah? In the early days of breaking the sound barriers.
Guys, hang on a sec. Hang on. We're just removing the shot.
On the beach. In Ferry. You probably didn't know that because you were probably tilling the soil or doing something. So, how was it in those days in your world when you went from farm boy to racing driver?
Well, I mean, I drove from the age of 9 on the farm, and so when I got to my sort of 16, 17, it was natural and obviously I would pass the test because I drove all right. I had no idea that obviously I'd go on to race, and the closest I could get to it was by being a marshal at Goodwood, so I applied to Bognor Motor Club, who used to actually come to our place at Church Farm for their meetings, so I got to know the people. And so I sort of used to go there and wave the blue flag and the yellow flag and the white flag when necessary. And at the same time, I was at college at Cirencester, and as always, you meet like-minded people that want to do a bit of racing. So we talked quite a bit about it, and actually the three of us went to the Jim Russell Racing School up in Norfolk, which is a hell of a long way from Cirencester and even further from Sussex, up near Norwich. And one day I got sort of picked out, the group of sort of, and Jim Russell himself was running it, and he just said, "You've got a great future," and his very words were, "I guarantee within a year you'll be in a factory team," which of course just about finished me off, because I had no idea, nobody had said that I drove well or was adequate to do it, to be a racer. And nobody had ever told me what to do. I just sort of followed the track around and through the corners and walked and then drove through them and that sort of thing. So that's how I sort of got the feel for it. And driving was natural to me. And of course, Goodwood being on the hills, I could hear the cars going around. And I'll be out there sort of hoeing the sugar beet and stuff like that. And I would sort of could hear the cars and the gear changes through all the corners. And the days you could make the noise. And of course, it was a pretty natural thing that I should follow the sport. And but having no idea that in fact I would be any good at it. And I was saying just earlier that in 1959 I was 18, and my stepfather in fact said, "Would you like, well, let's go to Monza to see the Italian Grand Prix." So we drove down his XK150. And the incredible thing was, we sat in the grandstand in 1959, opposite the pits right out on the start line, which is still exactly the same today. And 9 years later, I was, without knowing it, was sitting there on the grid in a Formula One Ferrari in the Grand Prix of Italy. So things happen pretty quickly in a way. And there I was. I mean, it wasn't quite as quick as I'm telling the story, it was 9 really tough years. With Lotus 7, I won my first race at Goodwood on March the 13th, 1964. And then went on to Formula 3 for 2 years, up to Formula 2, and then up to Formula 1. And that's how that early part started, really, the transition from being a farmer in '66.
Wow.
In the midst of all that, my stepfather said, look, you know, you can always come back to farming, but you can't come back to racing when you're 40. So go off and be a race driver. And it was great, it was really wise words. And he also said, you know, I can, you know, I'd love to help you, but you've got to go and prove to me you've got the ability to do it. So that's what happened. And that was the start. And it went on for another 40 years.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, you've been described by fellow racing driver Hans Stuck as one of the most liked drivers of your generation. And I think we've sort of witnessed that today.
Well, I haven't said much yet.
Well,
Thank you very much.
No, so many of my chums here have watched you race at Goodwood. And in fact, there's one over there, Kim, who's not watched you at Goodwood until you actually didn't watch him on Friday. But nevertheless, Kim raced at the same time as you did. And my son June and I were watching the Gunasika race last Sunday week, okay? And it's so different to F1, isn't it? It's so different.
What they do in America?
Yeah, sure.
Well,
How did you see it in those days? I mean,
well, no, we're talking about the difference between Formula One and the difference between that and single-seater racing in America, right? I think that's what I'm coming to. And they use different engines, and it's the American way of going about it, which used to be ovals, which we never had any ovals in Britain. We ended up with one somewhere up north, which has gone back into its use now.
that's right.
But none of us knew about running around ovals. It was the American way, and they did that with single-seaters, and then they did it obviously with NASCAR. The interesting thing is that NASCAR and IndyCar, which is their Formula One equivalent, go around the racetrack anti-clockwise, and in Europe we invariably normally go anti-clockwise. And we don't.
One or two.
Yeah, one or two. I don't know why, but the main difference is just that it's the American way of doing it because of what they can get the engines and everything for, and the chassis built over there are cheaper than having them shipped from England and to take them over. What most of them do start here in their design, and then obviously Formula One is so way out on cost and and its technology. And the Americans are very aware that they want to keep the price down to a budget so that everybody can go racing.
The budgets here are just astronomical.
I don't even really know whether 400 or 500 million a year, but there is in America that probably
I'll take two.
a third or a half of that. Sure. Unfortunately, in America, the fans aren't that enthusiastic necessarily about IndyCar. NASCAR used to be the favourite, the big Ford Falcons and all sorts of things going around. They were very, very popular. They seem to have lost a bit of their way, but Formula One has now got itself into a very strong place. And the sports cars, which is what I did, is this sort of the equivalent that NASCAR is to IndyCar. They're not on a parallel, but they're still great because the manufacturers can go out and exhibit their wares. And as they say in motorsport, if you win on Sunday, you sell on Monday. So if you can go out and win in your Ford on the Sunday, there's a veg, Ford dealers will be laughing on the Monday and sell more cars. That was the principle of it, but it's changed from that.
And that was Ferrari's principle too.
Well, it was, yes. It was quite difficult for him, but that's why he did. Mr. Ferrari, in fact, his passion was racing. He didn't really want to build cars. He just loved racing, and everything he did was with winning races in mind. But in fact, the real story about him is that, in fact, most of his dealers around the world, they paid for the racing. They didn't make enough money out of selling the Ferrari road cars, and it didn't take much to figure that out, to build race cars the way he did. Because when I joined him, there was Formula 2, Formula 1, sports car and hill climb car. He had 4 different types of car that they were assembling to build to go racing. And there was so little money in racing, but the fact was, of course, it was the PR value they got from the cars, on TV and became bigger and bigger over the years. But that's why, Formula 1's got so big now, is because the sponsors get such exposure around.
Exactly right. Which sells products. I was going to talk about, obviously your first race in Goodwood in Lotus 7. You then graduated to F2 in Brabham, which led to you to start with Ferrari. I mean, you met Enzo Ferrari.